you know, the people are amorphous and they're open to propaganda. And these people are expected.
You believe that propaganda was a very large aspect of the yellow movement?
They have always been like that. Even during the time of your father, we were. They have people in all the media outlets.
In your view, has the role of the media increased or decreased over the years?
It will increase, especially with the speed of communication now. Well, we have the cell phone, the social media. You can read the news
on your telephone.
In your cell phone, and you can also text your opinion. They can manipulate public opinion. Even the surveys will be suspect at that point.
Well, the surveys have already become a little bit are taken with a grain of salt already.
Correct.
So I guess that is a distinct possibility. So despite the fact that all of these things, the performances of those who ally themselves with the yellow group have been dominant, do you feel that dominance will still for the last 30 years? Do you think that dominance will continue?
I do not know whether they're dominant. But,
well, not now, but they have been.
You know, if they have a smartmatic. Bongbong, when I was in that government, I knew that I was there only temporarily because from the very start, I was actually like a pariah in the cabinet of Cory.
Yes, because you were considered the main implementer of martial law. And I think some of the orders that were signed by you and by then President Marcos. So kayo talaga ang sinisisi doon sa martial law.
At saka, hindi lang yun eh. 1 month after your father departed, I thought he will reopen the Batasan Pambansa. No, he did not reopen. What she did was to consolidate power unto herself by writing her own revolutionary constitution and assumed the powers, the executive power and the legislative power. The only thing she left was judicial power.
In the face of all of this, I think we come to the question: how did you think Cory did as president? Did you think wala kami dito, so hindi namin alam masyado yung mga detalye.
You know, Bongbong, having been involved in the cabinet of President Marcos, and I'm not saying this to denigrate anybody, I was dismayed when in my first cabinet meeting with Cory, he did not make any decision. He will say, oh, Tito, Gingona, Tito, ikaw naman magsalita. Mon, ikaw magsalita. Oh, Doy. Ganun. Well, no decision. And I realized finally, personally, I'm sorry to say this, but I realized in that first meeting that I had in that cabinet, that the president that succeeded Jordan did not know anything about governance. And it showed afterwards.
Well, it wasn't.
He was the ones governing the country was not Cory. Other people who were around her.
Oh. Well, it's not surprising because if you look at her record, she has no experience or even inclination, as far as I could tell, for government work or public service.
Yeah. Well, I do not know whether it is true that she was very fond of playing mahjong. And that's why.
Well, since we've come to the subject of Cory Aquino, and I guess that brings us to EDSA. We've had more than one, we number them, EDSA 1 and EDSA 2. But this popular uprising has become already a part of the political narrative or the political methods of unseating a government or bringing a government down. In your view, is that a good development? Should it be part of the narrative? Should we choose our leaders this way?
You cannot prevent people from marching in the streets to peaceably assemble for redress of grievances. That's constitutional. But in the case of the first EDSA, the question is why EDSA? Who decided that the event must be in EDSA? Cory did not decide that. None of the Liberal Party people decided that. They were all gone. They were in Cebu.
While the drama in Manila was unfolding, Aquino was in the southern city of Cebu, continuing a post-election campaign advocating civil disobedience.
It was there because we went to Camp Aguinaldo,
right.
and that is where the confrontation took place. Now, as far as we were concerned in the RAM, we never planned to involve the people. It was plainly, purely a military action, but with one condition, that we will not harm the president and his family. It just happened that it burst that day because of things that I do not want to discuss now, no? Involving a group of generals who had also a political plan. I do not know whether your father, I'm sure your father did not know, or your mother. But they had a political plan for the country.
To establish an alternative government.
From my point of view, I had to do something about it at that point in our history because I was involved with the military. I was the head of the Department of Defense. I did not involve the generals of the military because they were involved. And so I had to work with young people in the military who were idealistic enough to agree to protect the interest of the country and the Filipino people without involving the people themselves. You see? But God was with us because that event turned without any bloodshed, turned out to be bloodless. No?
Yes.
Oh.
Because
your father restrained himself.
I understand you gave them orders to wait.
I told them to wait because
they are massing civilians near our troops, and we cannot keep on withdrawing. They asked us to withdraw yesterday. When I talked to Mr. Enrile, he said you talked to you, we withdraw a little.
My order is to disperse
We cannot
the
withdraw all
crowd
the time, Mr. President.
without shooting them. No, hold on. You disperse the crowd without shooting them.
I remember many of his advisors at the time in the palace, when we were observing what was happening in the camps with you and General Ramos, many were advising him to
I read the book
attack.
of Art Armisa, no?
But,
and I saw the restraint of the president as gleaned from that book. And I saw also the folly of our plan to assault the palace. If we assaulted it, we could have been massacred. Because at that point, you were prepared already.
We were very well prepared. I think it's the first time we are able to talk about it.
We would have been massacred there, you know.
In fact,
but I think there was a guiding hand that more or less controlled that event. By the way, I did not know that your dad was sick, huh? If you remember, I went to the palace. I do not know whether you heard about this. July of 1985, I was resigning.
Why were you resigning?
Because some people reported to the president that my men in the Department of Defense were scaling buildings at night. It was true that we did, but that was in connection with his instruction to me to organize an anti-terrorist group unit in the Department of Defense.
So on that basis, you thought that you did not, no
No,
longer...
they were saying that you were planning something. Although, to be truthful, at that point we were organizing because I received an information that there was a military junta and that I was supposed to be executed by that junta. if something happens to your president. I did not know that the president was sick at that time.
Why were you on the kill list of that junta? Why are you the
Probably because I was a
enemy?
hindrance to their political objective.
So unbeknownst to many or most people, there was a plan for a military takeover already.
Correct.
And the junta was already organized.
Yeah.
Can you tell us who the members of the junta were? Well, maybe for
You will be surprised. The chief of his staff, the general of the head of the Philippine Army,
the army.
the head of the Philippine Air Force, the head of the Philippine Navy, the head of the Philippine Coast Guard. Those were the members of the junta.
How were they going to take over the reins of power?
According to the information I received, if your father died, they were not supposed to announce it at all. They will keep it away from the knowledge of the public. They will invite all the members of the cabinet in the name of your father for a cabinet meeting. And once we are in the palace, we will be quarantined. But in my case, I will have to be executed.
This is something that, again, I don't think maybe this is the first time that this information has seen the light of day.
Well,
So the uprising of what became EDSA was not a break with my father. It was an opposition to this junta.
correct. But it just happened that on the day we went to Aguinaldo, we were already going to be arrested by the presidential guards
Well, because
because of the information that you got, that the palace got. And naturally, we had no other way except to defend ourselves.
I think it reached a fever pitch when you were barricading, because I remember those helicopters, those very famous photograph of the helicopters landing on the roof and unloading firearms and military equipment. And nagbarikada na sila,
That was the
magbabarricade na.
helicopter of...
ng army.
No,
Yung
that
mga
was,
Huey.
That was the helicopter of, assigned to the Secretary of National Defense.
MND yun. I see. Yun na nga.
That was the helicopter I was using.
But they came and the photographs were
Correct.
published of them unloading firearms,
Correct.
unloading military
Correct.
equipment, communications equipment. And the assessment in the palace at the time was that this is the beginning of a coup d'etat. But we had information beforehand that there was going to be an attack on the palace.
Correct.
I received the information.
But there was no plan to harm the president.
That is what Greg Honasan also told me when we talked about this long after the actual events.
That was our common agreement.
And Minister Enrile commandeering the complex housing the Ministry of Defense.
Well, Tito, I have been, all this time, since 1986, I have been wanting to ask you a question.
Oh.
And I have never found the opportunity to do it. And I think this is a good time.
Yeah.
After all that happened in EDSA, after all of this uprising, etc., nandun na kami, dinala na kami sa Guam and then eventually to Hawaii. Bakit hindi kayo ang nagpresidente? You knew the characters that were involved and you were much more qualified than any of them.
Your dad was giving me the government in the morning of Tuesday, February 25.
I remember, Tito, I was there when he made the phone call to you.
Correct. He was asking me to ask Cory to postpone her oath-taking. But I told him I would try. You know, Bongbong, I did not intend to take over power in the first place. But while I was inside Camp Aguinaldo, Camp Crame, I was thinking about what will happen. And I said, if the military will take over, I will involve the country into a possible civil war. Because the election was just finished. There is a big block of votes that voted for Cory. There was a big block of votes that voted for your father. And I was not exposed to the electoral process at that point. I'm sure that if the military took over and I assumed power, I will have enemies inside my military organization also. Then there is a possibility that the two forces that fought in that election will combine. To,
Was it likely?
it's possible.
I suppose yung tropa namin and those who were opposed to you within the MND
Yeah.
center.
And then you have the bulk of the military at that point, who did not know where they will situate themselves. All of that I thought about it. By the way, Monday night, I called for Jimmy Ongping to come to Camp Crame, and I said, this event that is happening now will be a protracted event. Let us organize a provisional government to handle the running of our revolutionary government. I said I proposed 5 cabinet positions: just defense, finance, local government, justice, and foreign affairs. Sa inyo yung 4, kako, na posisyon. Sa amin yung defense. Because I wanted to balance their political forces against the military forces. Alam mo ginawa nila that night? That is where I started to suspect them. They filled all the positions in the cabinet. They organized their own cabinet.
But you had an agreement previous to
well,
that.
I had an agreement with Jimmy Ongping. Ay kako, hindi po na mga totoo na tao na itong kausap ko.
Yes, it's always been a mystery to me because you were positioned perfectly to take over the reins of power. And we were all a little surprised watching this again from far away. And we were saying, for sure, I'm sure, si Minister...
I was afraid not for myself, but for the country, that it will cause a bloodbath.
I think you were similar in thinking to my father because one of the reasons, and I asked him this directly, is that why were you so hesitant to use force in 1986? Nung talagang papasukin na yung palasyo, binobomba na tayo, binabaril na tayo, ganun. Why were you not, marami naman kaming tropa, we were very well prepared. Because as I said, we received the information of an imminent attack on the palace 1 week before you and General Ramos went to Crame and made your stand in Crame. So we had the chance to prepare. So we were wondering why did we not fight back with force? And he said that would have been the beginning of a civil war.
Yeah.
Which I think is exactly the way you saw it.
And that afternoon of when you left the palace, I do not know whether you were with the president.
I was.
When he called me, first he asked me, do you have any troops around the palace? I said, Mr. President, we do not have any troops around the palace. I said, but there are people firing at us. Well, those are not our people. Can you send someone to help us to stop those firings? And so I said, I will send General Olivas there. Then I mentioned to him that I have just spoken to Ambassador Bosworth.
Bosworth at the time.
At the time. And then he stopped for a while. And then he said, can you call him back and ask him to make available to me the services of General Allen, Teddy Allen, so that we can leave Malacanang. I called up Bosworth after our conversation. I called up Bosworth and I told him about the request of the president. After a while, Bosworth called me up and he said, can you ask General Ramos to coordinate with Teddy Allen to help in the departure of the president from Malacanang? And that's what I did.
I remember very well that it was General Allen. We remember we were waiting for the American helicopters.
Yeah.
Because the presidential helicopters was also in Malacanang Park.
Yeah.
But they had already been strafed. So may tama na, so they were. But then the proposal was that they would send helicopters from Clark. They sent 2 big helicopters from Clark. And I remember when we crossed Pasig River, the officer who met us was General Allen.
After I talked to the president, I rode to Wakwak, to the house of Josephine Cojuangco, the sister of Cory, because that's where she was. Cory was there. And then when I arrived, his whole cabinet, the people who became her cabinet officials were there, and Doña Aurora. And then I reported to Cory about my conversation with your dad, as well as my conversation with Bosworth, and that the president, your dad, was departing Malacanang. And then Cory did not know anything about that event. She called Bosworth. And then I remember Cory saying, shouted over the phone, "No, I do not want him here. Let's take him out."
That's it. I remember that. Yeah. I remember that. That was in the middle of the night already. We were already in Clark. The Americans were still did not know quite what to do with us. The original arrangement is that we will be flown to Ilocos.
Cory requested that from Bosworth when I made the report to Cory. And because of the interregnum, the gulo at that point, probably the transmission of the information to the operating units of the American military was delayed.
Well, we were awoken. Well, we hadn't slept, but it was in the middle of the night. I remember General Allen asked to see my father, and I said that he's resting and he's not in the best of health. And what is it about? And he sat us down and he said that we were surrounded by NPA forces. And that there were 2 columns of NPA units coming.
There were no NPA.
Well,
that was already, they misinterpreted the Poway to Hawaii.
that was what eventually became the joke. On that basis, they said, we have to fly you out immediately. And instead of going to Poway, and the excuse that was given was that we cannot fly to Poway because Poway does not have lights to land in the middle of the night.
Because, I knew that your dad had an intention of going up north. Because in the morning of Tuesday, he asked, if I go north, do you think I'll be protected? Of course, I told him. And if I get out of the country, can I come back? And of course, Mr. President, you are a president of the country, you are free to come back to the country. Those were my answers to him. Oh.
So it was very much a decision at that time na ayoko dyan. Basta get him out of the country was then Cory's decision.
Siguro sabi ni, nakinig sila kay Cory, yung mga Amerikano, because sabi niya, peremptory yung kanyang sabi. No, I do not want him here. I take him out of the country.
Well, that seems to be the same report that we got, and actually, eventually, the Americans told us that we were actually said the instruction was that not to be brought anymore to Ilocos, but to be taken out of the country. So Tito, let's take all of this now. With this as the foundation of all of the as a historical background, context.
The history was totally distorted to favor one group.
And it is unfortunately continuing. That is why exercises
Yeah.
such as these are
And,
important.
Little by little, the truth will come out.
Well,
I'm glad that you have asked me to join this conversation so that at least we can somehow correct the distortions of history.
I am very grateful to you.
And I'm
Tito,
willing to challenge anybody here in this country to debate with me about the events.
Well, Tito, your knowledge and your perspective is based on actual experience and actual facts. I think that is the difference between you
I did not
and those that
manufacture
have been
facts.
challenging you.
I have not lied to the people. I have not manipulated the events. I dealt with them as I faced them.
Well, Tito, on that note, I
Thank
think
you.
I know it is for me to thank you for allowing us a view into the
Anytime, any place, I'm always at your service.
Just tiyag ni natata. Thank you very, very
Magkanyaman
much.
na.